Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the first episode of our Python web app series, Python Web Apps 101. My name is Anna. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. And while we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer live. The session is recorded. It'll be available to view on demand right here within 24 to 48 hours. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters. Pamela, Renee, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. It's exciting to see so many people chatting about where they're from and what your experience is. And this is our first workshop in this series. It is going to be a 6-part series where we're just going to keep building and building and building. And I'm sure you all are coming from a wide ranges of experiences with Python and web development. And there's going to be some stuff you already know, some stuff that's new to you. And that's just how it is when we learn together, is that, we just keep picking up new things. So for today, we're going to be starting off with really make sure we get all those fundamentals down so that we can keep building on them in the subsequent sessions. And hopefully I could see all your lovely avatars in the upcoming sessions as well. And can we bring up the slides so that we can do some intros? Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
We should also grab this link in the chat. You'll want to have it for later. Pamela has these amazing slides that have all of these notes and stuff, so you can just take it and use it forever and just learn so many things after the session as well. So grab that link and we'll be using it throughout the session as well.
Good call out, Renee. Thank you. About me, I'm Pamela, and you'll see me throughout these series. I am a Python cloud advocate at Microsoft, which means my job is to try and make it easier for Python developers to work with Microsoft technologies like Azure and AI and VS Code, GitHub. I mean, anything that overlaps Python and Microsoft. So it's actually a lot of stuff, and it's really a lot of fun. Before that, I've lectured at UC Berkeley. I was one of the first engineers at Coursera. I developed many of the programming courses for Khan Academy and was also in developer relations at Google. And if you want to connect with me online, there is all my links. I like to tweet and toot and post and all of those shenanigans. All right, Renee.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Renee. I'm also a Python cloud advocate. So what Pamela said she does, I'm also doing that. On the side, I also love teaching girls how to code. I run the Girls Programming Network, where we teach girls to code for free around Australia, which is really cool. And I have a business connected code where we help schools be able to deliver the digital technologies curriculum here in Australia. You probably figured out I'm from Australia. I'm joining you from Sydney, Australia today. And yeah, you can jump online and talk to me in any of these places and hit me up basically for learning, etc. Basically, I will teach Python. I will do coding, community, and education in any way I can combine them. So that's what I'm here to do today and at Microsoft and in my many other endeavors. So excited to talk about some Python today with you all. So I guess let's get started on what we're going to go through today in this session. So today we are doing some Python Flask web app stuff. And I've just lost my monitor. No, it's come back. Okay, cool. So we're going to talk firstly about how the web works. Then we are going to do some stuff with a web framework, Flask, which is what we're investigating in today, and do a couple of exercises to actually get hands-on with Flask today and build a website that is working. Then I'm going to hand over to Pamela. She's going to talk about Quart, which is our async version of Flask. And then we are going to talk about hosting web apps. So Pamela's going to show us how we can deploy an app on Azure, which is super exciting and way easier than you think it is. So it's really cool. So with that, let's talk about how the web works, because how does it work? Many of us may be familiar with clients and servers, but maybe these are words that you're like, oh, I don't really know what they are. So we've got our server. That's any computer that is serving a website. So when we're doing local development, that could be your computer. and you could access your website from your computer, or the server could be the cloud where something is hosted and you are accessing it from. And the way that you access that is by making it an HTTP request, Hypertext Transfer Protocol request. You don't need to remember that, but you ask for some stuff and then you get a response where you get it back. So what are these requests actually like, and what are we requesting? So there's two kinds of, there's a few kinds of requests, but the two main kinds that we will talk about today, and we'll mostly be focusing on the GET request. We're asking to get some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are the languages that make up our web pages that you see when you go to a website. You might also be asking to get a file to download, any other kind of file, or some raw data or text from wherever you're going to an address, a URL, and it's going to be like, oh, well, when someone asks for something at this address, I give them this. So that's what that GET request is going to do for us. Or with a POST request, you can actually be asking to give something to somebody else. So you could be submitting a form that you filled out, you could be uploading a file, or you could be sending some raw data or text yourself. So here is an example of a GET request and what it looks like in raw form. We've got this GET request here, and we're going to example.com, high quality website there. And then we're going to get back some HTML as well as some headers, which tell us what kind of thing it is. Oh, it's HTML. That way your browser's going to know, oh, I know what to do with some HTML. I'm going to put together like this, and some other metadata that's going to help it know what it's supposed to look like, essentially, in terms of the characters, etc. So that is the essentials of, like, you ask for something and you receive something. And it's also got this status code up here, and we're going to talk about that in just a second right now. So when you make a request, you might have seen a couple of different status codes, whether it's as a developer or just as a user. You might have been familiar with 404 not found, where you go to a website that you think is going to be there and it's just not there. That web page, you can't be found. 200, your 200 codes, whether it's 200 or like different numbers of starting with 2, there, it's all hunky-dory. It's okay. Here's your website. Your 300s are, maybe it's been moved permanently, maybe there's a redirect going on, things like that. 400s are, it's not here, or no, you don't have the authority to look at this thing. Maybe you're not logged in. Maybe you've made too many requests if you're seeing a 429 error. It's like, stop spamming us, my friend. Or 500 errors, those are server-side errors. That's on the server. That's how bad if we made the server and it's got a bug in it, maybe, things like that. You can see there's a lot of different codes, and they help us to know what's going wrong when something isn't working. So you can look at more of them, all with an associated cat picture. So I would highly recommend visiting that link. Okay, so we talked a little bit about you make your request and you get some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you haven't done any front-end development, you might not be super familiar with what those are. So HTML, that contains the content and the structure of the page. It's got your text and also how it relates to each other, like in order. It should go in this order. This is a heading, that's a paragraph, etc. Then we've got CSS. This is how things are pretty, and also how it gets laid out, and it relates to the things that you've laid out in the HTML. And then JavaScript is the code that makes your content interactive. So you can click on stuff and it does cool stuff. So here's some HTML examples. We've got a heading here, which is our H1, the biggest heading. You can go, just keep putting in more H's. H2, slightly littler. So H3, even smaller. H6, smallest heading, etc. Then we've got paragraphs for the most of your text. You need to, you can't just write text in it. You can, but it's going to get messy. So you put things in a paragraph tag, and you have things that have multiple layers, like an unordered list. So this is going to give us some dot points that say topic 1, what is the web, topic 2, web dev frameworks, etc. So these are just a couple of the different types of tags that you have, but there's heaps and heaps and heaps of tags. So you can have headings, paragraphs, you can have images, links, lists, tables. Those are the kinds of content you might put in. You can also have parts that group different things together, like divs, sections, articles. And you have metadata tags as well for saying, I like these fonts, please, or these styles, etc., that you want to put in your thing. And there's also a lot of other ways that you are essentially tagging your content as semantic chunks that you can then address later, whether it is with your CSS to be like, I want all things that have a span tag, for instance, and they should all be green and they should be italic, and you can make rules that specifically relate to those different things that you've set out. So with that, a little more about CSS. So we've got rules that we get to set out in our CSS. So I've got an example here that is setting a rule for all heading 1. They should have the font family, that's the style of font, of Roboto, and a backup of sans serif. And then we also want to set the color. And then for all our paragraphs, we want the background, like kind of like a highlighter behind it, to be yellow. So you've got a lot of different things you can do with that. This is a very basic example of just kind of the syntax of how it looks. But you can identify items, whether you're saying, I want all heading 2 elements to have this font. I want all, maybe you want to have elements that relate to other things. So all, maybe we have headings and then we have links inside of them. Everything that is a link that is inside of a heading, we want to have a green green text and an underline, for instance. Or we might even want to say, oh, okay, we've put a class in all of these buttons that are for submitting or for going to another page, for instance, and they should all have round corners and they should all, when you hover over them, go purple, for instance. Or if you want to identify just an individual thing, it's like, this is a very special item, I want a specific ID for it, you can say, this ID belongs to this thing and this thing only. And then we can say, when you see this thing, we want to make it bright purple. It's very important. So this is a bunch of rules. They do have like an order in which they happen. So there is a priority order. And if you really want to override them, you can do that with the tag important as well. Cool. So more on CSS. What can you do? Styles for colors, fonts, sizes. You got margins, padding, sizing to see, like, give things some white space, lay it out as well. So maybe you have a grid of different photos. Or you have like 100 different photos. Should they all be in one in a row, or should they follow on from each other and kind of go, maybe you want to set out some sort of table thing that has 3 across and then another 3 and 3 on every row, things like that. So you set a bunch of things like that, as well as things like when you hover over an item, that's a CSS thing. That means that you can set that it goes bright purple every time you hover over something. So there's a few basic dynamics that you can cover in CSS as well. So lastly, our third language is JavaScript. This is the code that accesses the page content. So all those like things you laid out in your HTML, and it can do stuff to them. So your HTML is kind of what your page is represented as now. But if you click a button, you could say, okay, for instance, I'm writing all of this text in this box here. And when I click send, maybe I want to make it pop up here like we've got this as an assistant. Or you can have a text box, and every time you click submit, it just replaces the entire page contents with whatever you've typed in, for instance. You can do any manner of things with JavaScript to change what the page contents is, as well as change things like the IDs and turn on different CSS essentially by changing some of those different characteristics of the HTML. You can also do things behind the scenes, like make requests for more data and process the responses, or manage things like cookies. So that's the front end. We've asked, hey, can I please have some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Great. That goes to our server, and there's like, oh, cool, you've asked for this web page. I know the 3 things, or like the 3 kinds of files I'm going to give you for that. But I might also be able to do some other stuff for you, such as maybe you need to be logged in, because some websites, like a social media website, you need to be logged in, for instance, to see certain pages. So we'll check that first. You might also need to check the database to go, oh, cool, you've asked to go to this web page for your friend's profile on the social media site. I'm going to grab all the photos from the database for that, so I can send them along with the information with the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, so you can put it all together. And it can also manage things like caching, so you're not making as many requests and stuff to the database, things like that. So basically, that's where you put all of your scripting stuff. You want to like all of the logic that exists outside of like looking at the web page and clicking on things and doing stuff when you receive the website. Okay, cool. So we've got our client side, we've got our server side. We're making responses and getting requests and getting responses. For the front end, we've talked about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. TypeScript is also like JavaScript, very similar. But you might have also heard of things like React, Vue, other frameworks. And you're like, well, I wanted to learn React. How does that all fit together with JavaScript? You haven't said anything about JavaScript, Renee. And these are a bunch of different frameworks for the front end, like React and Vue, etc. They are ways of making JavaScript at the end of the day. At the end of the day, the browser speaks 3 languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You might use something like a framework like React, and then that is a way of creating JavaScript that has cool stuff that it does by itself. And then at the end of the day, it's JavaScript when it gets processed by the front end. That's how it gets treated. You might also use frameworks to work with CSS, like Less, for instance, and that is a way to make CSS easier to write, but also then at the end of the day, it becomes CSS and gets processed by the browser like CSS does. So that's on your front end. And on your back end, you have a bunch of other things that you can use to code your website, to make the server. So today we'll be using Python, but there's a whole bunch of other languages you can also use to say, hey, I'm open for business. I've got some stuff. If you say the right address to me, I'll give you the right stuff back. That's essentially what your server is here to do. Okay, cool. So now more on server-side Python. So firstly, we've talked very briefly about what a front-end framework is, like React, but at the same time, we can have one on the back end. And that is the best way to go about things because we don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time. Lots of people are making websites, turns out, and we have tools that are going to make it simpler so you don't have to manage doing everything. So we have Python, we have web frameworks, including several in Python, which are going to be covered in this series. And today we'll be talking about Flask. And these manage things like routing URLs to functions. So essentially, when you say, hey, I want to go to your website, I want to go to the home page, we go, oh, great, I have a function for that. What it does is it gives you the home page. It's like, great, we've married that up. And you ask and you will receive your website. You can also, they also have features for like running your server. We're like, yes, it's now alive. When we press go, now people can start asking us for those web pages. And also it can do things like supporting rendering templates for your web pages because it's really great and all to write all that HTML and CSS yourself. But if you think about a social media web page, how does my name and like my description and my pictures and stuff get in there? It's about putting stuff into a template because we don't want to have to hard code a profile page for everybody. So it will do that kind of stuff for you. And there's lots of different features that are covered by different frameworks, and they also come in different levels of complexity. So some are really simple to do, but maybe they're a bit more lightweight and they don't have as many features, which is great. You don't need all the features, or you want a really complex one that does a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of different frameworks, which might be the right one for the project you're doing. Okay, so a couple of frameworks, which we'll be talking about with Pamela in this series. Today, I'm here to talk about Flask, and we're also going to hear about Quart, which is the async version of it. Then also Fast API, another lightweight option for doing your framework of choice. And then Django, it's got things like an ORM, and which will allow you to have an easy way to interact with your database. So we've got a few different options there already. And Flask is a very popular one amongst these. But they're all three very popular web frameworks for Python. Okay, cool. But yeah, fun facts that Flask is used by a lot of people. We already saw it in this slide. It's used all over the place. And you might think, but it's so easy to use. How could a real website be built on Flask? Well, places like Khan Academy were originally written on Flask. Reddit, that's built on Flask. And Netflix, built on Flask. So today we're going to cover something that is being used in the real world to do real big things. And you can just start here with this session, and it's going to be super easy to get started. Okay, cool. So we're going to be using a file today to run our Flask. App.py is what you should call it. And then when you want to run the server, you can run this code that is written right here. Well, I'll be using code spaces today for our session, and you can just hit the run button as well, which is really great for when you want to test it locally. We'll get onto that in just a minute. But first, a quick talk about routes or routes, however people want to say it. So as we said before, we have some GET requests. For instance, this one would be the about page of our website. And we say, hey, this is what is called a decorator. These things with the little @ symbol at the start. We go, hey, I wrote this function. If someone ran this function, it would just give them the words about us. So when someone goes to this address, I want you to tell them, I want you to marry it up to this function and give them the words about us. You might also want to have something slightly more in depth, which we'll get into, like rendering a template or giving back a web page that is an HTML file. But you can start by just saying, hey, have this string. Then we have other things we can do. So, for instance, we might go to search. You do a internet web search. You will probably put in some sort of search parameters, like a query. And then we go, hey, you are searching for the query. It's important to get that out. So we'll have a look at a query string later on, which is getting some text out of here that was like, hey, you search for cats, picture of cats. Let's grab that with this request arguments from our string. And then you can also, have things that have, for instance, if you go to your social media page, you'd have user/Renee Noble, and then we'd be able to get that out of the URL and pop it in here as well. So we can start with things like that as part of our GET requests. And then for our POST requests, you might be submitting a form. You might want to say nothing about anything that they've submitted. This is like, thanks for submitting, terrific. Or you might want to get something out of the form they sent and said, oh, cool, that they did a form, they had their name in it. Thanks for submitting, Renee. Or you might have an even more complex data structure, get the whole JSON thing, get the data out of the JSON, and then say, hey, got your name again, thanks for submitting. So we've got different options there for our post requests too. Cool. So, as I said earlier, we don't want everyone in the world to have hard-coded social media profiles because no one wants to make those. That would be boring for people working at the social media places to be like, oh, someone signed up again, now I need to make another one of these. Instead, we have templates. So templates look like this. Flask uses the templating language called Ginger 2. So we have all these cool curly brackets. And when we have them, for instance here, we can put in a variable, which is cool. We can also do conditions, like if statements. If, for instance, you pass me a user variable, great. I'm going to say, that would be a user object here. I'm going to get the name. I'm going to print it out. Otherwise, if there's no user, then you're logged out, obviously. So you can do logic based on the things that you passed in, or you can iterate through things like items. So say you gave me a list of someone's friends on a social media page. You go, for every item, print the item. So print out every friend. Cool. So we've talked a lot about Flask and web frameworks and stuff now. So we're going to do some now. So time to actually make a thing. So what we're going to need today is a way to code this thing. You've got a bunch of options here. If you want to do the online development option, I'll be doing that one today. You just need a GitHub account. If you want to do local development options, you've got two options. You need a code interpreter like VS Code, potentially, and to have Python 3 installed. Or you can do this one that has more things needing VS Code, Dev Containers extension, and Docker for desktop. So, but I'm going to be doing it in code spaces today. And our exercise here is we're going to jump on this link, and then, which I'll put in the chat. Let me grab that. Yeah. And then we want to get our app up and running. We want to add an about page using a template. Check that it works. Always good to check things that work. And add a location query parameter for our route to display the value on the page. You could also do a name or whatever you want to do. Cool. So let us get started. and I have got this link already open in this page. Yeah, so this is our example here. If you're using this, I would highly recommend going to the fork button and you can create a new fork. I have made one in advance, so we don't have to wait for it to do the forking because that wouldn't be the best live stream ever. But it doesn't take you very long, so you can get started with that. And I've made one over here. And as I said, I'm going to be doing the web browser-based coding option today. And I'm using code spaces. So I've already created a code space, but you can also do the same thing by going create a code space on main. That will just take a couple of minutes to get set up, and that will have all of the tools and stuff you need to do today's session in there. So I've made my code space already. It's loaded up. I am going to add Copilot to this actually first, because then I don't have to write any templates myself. So I'm going to add the Copilot extension. If you have Copilot, it's super fun to use. And I'm just going to add that one here. Cool. And then I will start talking about what files we have on hand. Okie dokie. So first up, let us go to app.py. As we mentioned, this is where we're going to be running our code from. This is the server file. And we will run it in just a second. But firstly, we can see we've got a bunch of routes here. Let's make this a bit bigger. Cool. Excellent. If it's not big enough, do shout out in the chat, and then Pamela or Anna can shout at me if I've missed your messages. So we've got in here the stuff that imports Flask. Flask is a module that you can import into Python, and you can also get things like things that manage requests from it, the parts that do the templates, etc. So we can get all that, which is really handy, all part of our framework. Then this is the part that says, hey, this is my Flask app. You should know about it. Here you go. And then we have a bunch of routes. So we've got our home address, which is just the slash. And it just gives the index HTML. We've got the hello page. We've got the 404 message that's being handled here, being like, oh, that page doesn't exist. We want you to run this function. So it's got a different kind of route decorated than this one, which is like, hey, this is what goes with this. This is the, we couldn't find a thing, we should use this function instead. And finally, we have the code that runs the server here. So to get started, I'm going to run the server. Cool. So now it said, okay, server's running, and VS Code in the browser is going to say, do you want to open that thing? If you are doing this in the browser, you might notice, let's go back to here for a second. We've got port 8080 and stuff set up in here to run it locally. But because we need to do some port forwarding, as it's called, because we are working in the browser, so somewhere else our code is being run, and then we want it to seem like we're running it here, we need to do some forwarding. But VS Code handles that all for you. So that's just why this looks a bit different when you look up here. But we have our web page right there for us now. It's looking pretty cool. Pamela, this is some excellent CSS, looking beautiful. And high quality purple choice. I love it. And then we can go and we can learn more about this app. Oh, we can't because we haven't made the about page yet. Oh no. Luckily, we've got to see this picture of a cat, which is great. Okay, so we should do something about that. Let's go back and let's add a route for the about page. Cool. So I'm going to steal this one because that's easy. And we can see what we need to do to make a difference. So we are going to want to render a different page because we don't want to render the index page again. We're going to make this an about template, but we're going to need to make that template in a second. We're going to call this the about function because it's about getting the about page. And then we're going to make this have a route that when you go to like mywebsite.com/about, then you're going to get this page. So we've got our routing information there. Okay, cool. So that's looking good, except we need to add a template. So we go into our templates folder. When you have a Flask app, you should follow the same format as this in terms of where you put your templates, because it will look inside the template folder for your templates. So you don't just put them anywhere else, put them in the templates folder. And let's make a new file. About.html. This is where I'm happy that I have put in Copilot, because you don't want me to write this all out while you watch. I'm going to say, create an about page for my website. Okay. Yes. So we've got the HTML doc type. So it's like, yeah, cool. It needs to look like this. This is an about page. We've got all the head stuff there. This is a simple website I created to learn how to use Flask, the web framework. Perfect. And we got the body of the text. That's looking great. Okay, this is beautiful. I think we're ready to ship this content here. So let's give it another run from our app. So you can see down here that it has stopped running. So we will run it again. There we go. It's alive. Let's open that again. It's looking beautiful. And there we go. Excellent. One thing we've forgotten is that it doesn't have any of the cool, beautiful formatting that Pamela has put together in the CSS for us. But we're going to come to that later, because we are going to add some styling as part of the template when we extend the template. So we don't want to have to be writing that on every single page, because some of this is just the same stuff. So that's, something we're going to work on in the next section. But first up, we are going to add a query parameter to it. So what I want to do is say, okay, cool. This is an about page. I don't know exactly why I want to put a location in here, but I'm going to do it, because maybe you want to do a name, but I'm going to say, if I'm ever in your location, I'd love to say hi. That's what we're going to do. If I'm ever in, and now I'm going to do some variables. So in here, I'm going to put location, because we're going to be looking for a location. Love to say hi. But also we might want to have something, because if I haven't put in a location, this is going to look really silly. So I'm going to put in an if statement. I can find that percentage symbol. There we go. If location. Do that. Else. No. Yes. Else. Sure. Where in the world am I? That could be what we want to say. Says Copilot. Maybe. Let's say, drop me a line. Let me know where you are. That makes probably more sense. There we go. Okay, cool. That's looking good. So let's go back to our page here. Drop me a line. Let me know where you are. That's cool, because we haven't put in anything up here for our query parameter yet. So what should our query parameter look like? Well, we want to add something like this. So we've got our main thing here. We've got it ends in about. And then we also want to do our query parameter, which starts with the question mark. And then the information I want to provide it is a location. Cool. So, and I'm going to say location is I'm in Sydney. Okay, so we're going to do that. And we're going to see what happens. Interesting. Nothing's happened yet. Why might that be? We haven't actually passed any information to the template yet. So we need to go back to our app.py and say, oh, cool. We should actually get any information out of this request. Because right now we go, oh, cool. Thanks so much for asking about our about page. Here is an about template. But we haven't said to the template, which needs the information before it sends it off, what your location is. So we are going to steal from this hello request here. So you can see in the hello request, we've got name equals request.args.get. So it's saying, hey, look at the request, look at any arguments, like the query parameters that have come with it, and then get out the name. So I'm going to steal that. I'm not going to call it name, because that would be the wrong name for it. So we've said in our template, it's called location. So we're going to say, look in the request and please get the location out. Okay, cool. And our debugger, our server has restarted for us, which is great. So we're going to now do this again. We're going to refresh that. If I'm ever in Sydney, I'd love to say hi. Fantastic. Great. So now we've got our thing with our query parameter working, and you can have a play around with that. Also, you can go to the hello page as well. Let's do that, because that one already has a query parameter. And I'm going to say hello name equals Renee. Hello, Renee. So simple as that. You can say, now I have a customized website just for me, because it's putting that right in there. And you can do more complex things to make things, basically make websites for, as detailed as a social media site, because that's all generated with loops and if statements and variables in a template, which is really cool. Okay.
There is a question I often get when I teach this part in particular, which is, what is the difference between the URL query parameters and the template variables? Which I think is a relevant question, particularly given that we've named them the same here. So maybe you could try messing with the names and seeing what happens.
That. Yeah. So yeah, we have said in here, for instance, let's go to the name one. Name equals Renee. So we've said, okay, in here, we're going to accept a query parameter called name. Sorry. We've got our name. And then in here, we're saying we're going to get the name out of there. So we're going to get the name from that request. But let's say this is first name. We're going to call this first name. And I'm going to do it all caps, so it's all super clear. First name. And then if we ran this now, it would freak out, because we're saying, okay, please render the template. I'm giving you the first name. And then, so let's actually do that. Yep. We run this, and then anonymous, are we? We don't have a name, because we've passed in the name, and then we've gone, yeah, great. We've got the name out, which is super cool. And then we've assigned it to the first name variable, which is we're not using that anywhere. So if we go to the name, go to the hello HTML, we're looking for name. We haven't provided a name, but if we change this to first name, then, and we save that and we run it again. Let's see what I've done. We get the name. We've got the name.
So
here.
Yeah, and one interesting thing is that I think that, and this come up in the comments, I think that the development server will auto reload when you make changes to the Python file, but I don't think it auto reloads when you make changes to the templates, at least not the way you set it up. So it's
rerun it.
Kind of like, yeah, kind of you can jiggle or jiggle your Python.
Jiggle the Python. I thought, because we've just reloaded it, but that is something interesting is going on. We've got first name.
Comments about it. So let's see. Can you show the code again? I wasn't even looking at the code, but the folks in the comments have suggestions. So what is this? This is for hello. So can you go to hello?
Hello.
So if name.
Hello,
first name. Yeah, there we go.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric, in the chat. Beautiful. Change all your variables when you name things again. Okay, cool. Let us now have a look. There we go. It says hello, Renee again. We've fixed it. It's all alive again. But we can see that we've kind of got our server, we've got our client side variable almost. So like this is kind of when you fill out a form. I like to think of requests and functions and things as you're filling out a form. It says you need to put your name in the form. Great. And then when it gets processed by someone in the admin office, which on the back end side, we go, okay, cool. We've got the form. You put your name is Renee. That's great. We need to put it in our system as first name. So it's transferred that. And now when it gets used by the server, it's going to be like, oh, cool. Yes. Do I have a first name? Absolutely. It's Renee. Let's put that in wherever we need it. Excellent. Do you have any other questions before we move on to the next section?
Yeah, there's a nice question from Jawad. What is the difference between handling query parameters and handling path parameters?
Interesting. Okay, so we did have that in the slide a little bit. Let's grab this. Back to this slide. Cool. So in the URL, you might have a set structure that you're looking for. So you can essentially lay out what you expect your URLs to look like. And if they have fit some sort of shape, you probably use a regex to identify this shape, or you lay it out something like this. Be like, oh, cool. If it has a number, if it has a 4-digit number, it's the user ID. And then we can look up that ID and then return the appropriate user page or the book ID in this instance, etc. Things like that. Then also but on the query parameter side, it does mean you can have a lot more bits and pieces. For instance, if you do a Bing or Google search, you might have, this is my search query parameters. So I want to look up pictures of cats, but maybe we're looking up for images of cats, and when you do a search for that, you can say, oh yeah, I want pictures that are bigger than this size, and you can add extra bits and pieces of information there. So it's kind of like more like a form rather than like a incantation almost. This is more like you must follow the exact structure, and the query parameters are, I'm going to say, a bit more flexible. What would you say about that, Pamela?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you're using path parameters, it's usually that we're trying to follow, maybe more of a traditional REST, REST interface, CRUD interface. And that works really well when our data is really clean and we're accessing things that have clear IDs, and you want to have those in the URL. That's not always actually the case, that you necessarily want to have the IDs in the URLs. Amazon has a path like this. It's the, amazon.com/dp/ID. But I wouldn't say it's like the most user-friendly URL. So yeah, it just depends on what you're trying to do. For APIs, we very often are going to, use APIs that use a REST interface that's really nice and clean and identifies by IDs, because that's really common for APIs to have that much more strict interface. But for your user-facing URLs, I think you also want to think about what is a friendly URL for the user. I really like the user-facing URLs to be readable, but that's also, it's up to you and what you like in URL design.
I think it's also good when they're readable, because you're like, oh yeah, this page makes sense, and you might be more likely to remember it and go back there, rather than like, oh, how did I get to that crazy random number it was generating? I don't know. So yeah, it's nice when like social media sites let you choose your own URL handle at the end rather than giving you a random number. It makes you feel like a person, not like a number maybe in the system a little bit. Cool. But yeah, good questions in the chat. Why Flask? We'll be doing in this series a bunch of different frameworks. So today is on Flask. It's a super lightweight one. It's one of the most popular ones. I like using it just like if you're getting started with web development and stuff, this is a really great place to start. But also things like Netflix and stuff are built on Flask. So it's very extensible, but also super lightweight, and it does just the stuff that you need it to do. And then I think we've covered most of the questions other than that, unless I'm not caught up on any new ones.
Cool. Good new one from G Villa is that if you want to try Azure, and if you want to use an Azure web app, do you need two web apps, one for Python and a different one for the front end, or can you do it all in one app?
Great question. So I guess that kind of depends what you want your app to do, but I would say it's all one app, and then your server side, so your Python stuff, is serving up your other apps. So you can create your front-end app. So maybe you've got a really cool JavaScript interface where it's like, I don't know, maybe it's a game, you're jumping over things, etc. But that needs to come from somewhere. So that's one big app, and it comes from the server side. And it's like, oh, cool, I would like to play the game now, please. And like, oh, cool, great. Here is the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that you need to play the game. But it will just have, potentially you'll have a lot more detail on the front-end side than we have in this very sophisticated website that we've built here today.
Yeah, and I've actually done it both ways. So you can definitely do that approach, and that's what I use for a lot of mine. You can, if you really want to, you can serve your backend as like just the API for your site, and that would be off a single app. And then you might serve, you know, like a full JavaScripty, you know, Vue, React app, whatever, off of another app. And maybe that app's like, you know, for Azure, like an Azure static web app, or just generally like really optimized for serving static files. That is a very like fairly common architecture that people use these days, is having a different host for your API backend versus your front end, because then you can really have the front end host be optimized for serving static files, and then have your backend host be, you know, optimized for serving APIs. I still think there's a lovely simplicity to having it all in the same one, and you can still do, you know, you can do performance improvements for your front end serving when you have it in the same one. But you know, it's just two different architectures, and you can choose which one works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you could run it off GitHub Pages, for instance. Like you could do Azure Static Web Apps, or just like, oh, I've just got this stuff. Just I want to make a GitHub page. I've got my HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and that JavaScript can be calling, as we mentioned, it can make requests for more data, and that could be hitting our API. That could be running in Flask, Fast API, or wherever. You could run it in Azure Functions, for instance, which is like, yeah, I just have this data that needs to be served occasionally. That could potentially be something that you want to do. Yeah, but great question. What about AI? Hot topic. How can I integrate with AI? That's a great question. So we've got our different routes going on. Let's jump back to this code. So in here, we can get many things with our query parameters. For instance, you could be getting a request being like, yeah, I want to make a picture of a cat as your query parameter. What do you want to make? You know, pick query cat. Please draw me a cat. And then we go, okay, cool. What have they asked for? They've asked for a cat. Then in here, we can put all manner of information, in all manner of code, I should say. So you go, okay, cool. Instead of just saying, oh, I want to get the location, I want to print it out on the screen or something, I just want to say, okay, I want to get this location. It doesn't need to be in here. In fact, let's just grab that out for a second, just to make it a little bit simpler. It's going to say location equals that, and then we're going to say location is location. But if we wanted to say, I want to make a picture of the location, we could have a bunch of code in here. We could have imported some GPT, like DALL-E stuff for Azure OpenAI, and say, hey, I want to call the Azure OpenAI DALL-E model that I've set up with this prompt, and then I want to get that picture. And then I want to serve up that picture as part of this template. So you can do basically anything in here to transform data. So if you're like, oh, okay, instead of like, maybe let's just do a super basic example. We're going to do location equals location.upper. Cool. Okay, so now it should say in here, let's go to about, where we talk about locations. About, yes, Sydney. And now I've broken the thing because I haven't reloaded it. Yes, reload this page. There we go. Now it's in uppercase. So basically, you can do whatever you want here. I've done making it uppercase, but you could be sending it out to an AI model, getting something back, processing that, putting it in your putting it into the template, whether you want to generate something, generate some text with ChatGPT, kind of like that, kind of like, here's a request, please fill this out for me, or you want to generate an image or whatever you want to do, and then you can just stick that into your template. Yes, I can show the about page again. There we go. So now we've got Sydney. It's on all caps. It's what's going on there. And
maybe they want to see the
code.
Yeah,
we can definitely do that. There we go. So yeah, in here we've got if location. If I'm ever in location, I love to say hi. If there's not a location, so if this was blank, then it would be like, oh, cool, there's no location. Let's do this text here. Drop me a line. Let me know where you are. So yeah, that means we can really do anything with our server code that you can do with Python. If you can do it with Python, you can put it into your web page somehow, basically. And Python has all manner of ways to connect into AI technology. Anything else to add, Pamela?
I'll show you a demo in my section.
Love it. Excellent. Okay, let's move on to the next section then of this demo. If you wanted to use AI, would you have to save it to a storage to be able to show it? Yes, that's a very good point. If you generate an image, you'd be putting it in, for instance, into Azure Blob, for instance, or a database of some sort. And then you just need to be able to create a link to that resource, and then you can put that into the page.
You could pass down a data encoded URI as well. Like if you really didn't want to serve it into blob storage, you can pass down blobs and data base64 encoded URIs if for some reason it didn't work with your architecture to save it into storage and the user didn't want that.
Yeah. And depends on what AI you would be doing. Like if you're just generating text, you don't need to store that necessarily. You just want to grab it. It's like, yeah, cool. Make me a cool new nickname based on my name. Then you get it and then you send it off. And then if they wanted to do a new nickname, then they might not get the same nickname next time around because you're generating with AI and you haven't stored it, but you could just use it and lose it basically. Cool. We've done this exercise now. Let's jump on to template inheritance then. So as I said, we haven't got any cool HTML on our new about page because I was lazy and I didn't want to put it in again because it's already in the other page. So what we're going to do in this section is learn about inheritance. So here we can see that here's the code that we want to be in all of our things. We want to have a page that should have a title, but we're going to need to pass that title in because it changes every page. And then we have the contents. You might also put in the head things like your link to your style, to your CSS sheet. So you can have that and be consistent across all the pages. So then what we need to do is have a base template that looks something like this. And then for each page, we want to extend on this block content in here. So basically, we're going to say, hey, it's like a template that you put a template in. And we're going to put this into it every time we extend this base template. So we're going to say, okay, cool. Please grab the base template, first part. And now this is the block content that I want you to put into that section in the middle here. So we're going to take a look at doing that now. So we're going to create a base template about what's common across all of our things. So we want to get that CSS, we want to get that head, and we want to have a body where we can put some content. Then we've got to refactor the other templates to extend on the base template. And then we want to change the 404 handler to use the template instead of what it's currently doing. So let's do that. Yeah. Maybe we won't do all of the templates because we do have a limited amount of time today, and we want to hear about Quart and also deploying it because then you can give this beautiful website to everybody that you know, which is really the goal of the web. Okay, cool. So let's start with a base template. New file, base.html. So I'm calling my base template, but you may have multiple base templates in your website if you had kind of different sections, but a lot of them you'll just have the one kind of base template. Cool. Okay, let's just actually steal from, where was it? The other slide here, because that has a lot of good stuff. I'm going to copy that out, and then I'm going to adapt it to have the parts that we also want that we've already got in here. So what I want is I want this style link in all the things. So this is saying, hey, have this link. It's a CSS style sheet. We're going to want that in the head, and we want that on all of our pages. So we're going to put this into the base template. Okay, that's looking pretty good to me, I reckon. So next up, we're going to need to go and adapt our other things to use the base template. So let's go to the About page because it's currently looking pretty sad with no CSS. So About page. Great. Okay, so we can get rid of a bunch of this stuff because we don't need this anymore because that's all covered in the base template, and we can get rid of this as well. But we do need to put in the part where we extend the base template. So we're saying, hey, get me that base template. And then we also want to say, and the stuff that I've got here is the block content. This should go in the block content place. So we have our start and end block, which is looking pretty good.
I think we don't need the body. You can go ahead and check the base
yes,
to see, but I'm guessing we
100%.
already have a body.
We do have a body, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's already there. Thank you, Pamela. We don't need 2 bodies. So even simpler, looking beautiful. Let's run that now. But first, we need to, because we know in the base template, we are passing in the title. So otherwise, it's not going to know what this one's title is because we got rid of that. So let's go back to here. Let's go to the About page, and we're going to say, adding into this collection here, title equals About. Great. Okay. So now, if we run this, hopefully it's beautiful. It's beautiful again. Excellent. Okay. Looking good.
Yeah, and we could also have done that title as a block title. It just depends on what's going to work well for you. If you wanted to be able to do that as a block instead of passing it in as a, a parameter in the Python code.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, two ways of doing things, whether you want to pass it in or you want to have it set out in the template. But yeah, cool. We've got that happening. And then let us make what else on our to-do list? We've got refactor the other templates. We've refactored one template. I think that's enough. Let's do the 404 one, and then we'll hand over to Pamela to do some Quart stuff, I reckon, because at the moment we are just saying, 404, we're just writing our HTML like right in here, which is cool. You can really see what's happening without having to leave, but probably we would want to make, if we're going to make it based on our base template, we're going to want to have it in its own template. But as you can see, you can just write raw code. Like if you just want to say like, actually just like hello, you can just put it in there, or you can write like stuff right into there, or you can render it. So we've got a lot of options going on here. But let's make I'm going to call it status 404.html. And then we are going to extend the template and then get the block content. Let's grab that let's steal it from the about one. And then we are going to pop that in here, going to empty out all this stuff, because this is the like raw version here. And then, yeah, let's have Copilot write a thing for us, but I also want that image because it was cool. We've got to have it. And now it's going to be pretty as well, which is the most important part here. So now let's go to, you might need to reboot the server for that one. Let's give it a go. And then let's go to our boot. That's not a thing. We've not got any styling. Interesting, because I didn't put any CSS in it. No, it's in the base template.
Well, we're not rendering the template yet.
Not rendering the template. Of course. We should probably do that. We've done all this hard work to make a beautiful template, and we have not rendered it. Okay, cool. And we're going to do status 404. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Let's do it. Yeah, take us to a place that doesn't exist. Thank you. We're going to go to blah. And we've got beautiful text now. So I think we've done a pretty good job on rendering your templates with our base models now. So with that, I'm going to we've got a couple of questions before I hand over to Pamela. How to comment outlines in a template. Great question. You can do just your HTML, ones there. And hot tip for whenever you're using VS Code, if you do Control-Shift, or if you're on a Mac, Command-Shift, no, it's not Shift, / that will give you the appropriate comment tags for whatever language you're using, which is really handy. So you can do that. Cool. And I think, can you show an example with extending CSS? I think we don't have time for that today. But I'm going to hand over to Pamela now for some Quart. Yes.
All right. So looks like this is my computer. All right. So thank you, Renee. So I am going to talk about Quart. So what the heck is that? It is the asynchronous version of Flask. So it is actually built on top of Flask. When you bring in Quart, you will be bringing in Quart as well as Flask as its dependency. And the Quart and the Flask containers do work really, really closely together. And I'm hopeful that in the future, maybe Quart and Flask will basically be the same thing, because I think we are moving to a future where we're generally going to be wanting to use asynchronous frameworks for a lot of our applications. Now, Quart does look pretty darn similar to Flask. So this is, an example route here. The differences are that now our functions have an async in front of the signatures, and then some of the calls have an await in front of them because they are now asynchronous function calls. So this sort of thing is particularly useful if your apps have slow network calls, like slow API calls that take a long time to respond, database calls that take a long time to respond, or file reads that take a long time. A big example of that is AI. There are various questions here about how can we bring AI, into our applications. If you are doing that, you're definitely going to want to use Quart or Fast API. Those are two asynchronous Python web frameworks. And here, just to talk more about that, why do we need async? So we need async so that we can have web apps that support concurrency. So to give an example, if we have a web app that's built in Flask, what will happen is that when we have it in production, we'll have, various, we call them workers or processes that are handling user requests. So you imagine that a user comes to our, AI chat app and they, ask a question of it. And so the app gets the request from the user and, does whatever processing, and then realizes it needs to make a call to OpenAI in order to get the response. So it makes that call, and that call can take a really long time. It could take, up to like 10 seconds or something, depending on the model you're using, right? So while that's happening, the worker is not allowed to do anything else. It just has to sit there and wait for that response to come back. So that means if another user is trying to use the app as well, they can't be served by that worker. That worker is busy just sitting there, just waiting for that call to come back. Now, when we use async, this is what happens instead in this second diagram here, right? So the worker, sends off the request to OpenAI. While it's waiting, it is allowed to handle requests from other users. So if it gets another request, it can start doing all the, Python side processing that it needs to do for that request. And then, it sees it needs to make a call, it'll make that call. And, and then that call will happen. But then the original call will come back at some point. And then, as long as it's still waiting on the other one, it can actually finish that original request. So what you can see is that this worker can handle concurrently more users than it could in the past. So this becomes an issue when we are putting out our apps in production and we want them to be able to handle lots of users, and we don't want to have to break the bank and spend huge amount of money on just throwing lots and lots of more workers and processes at them. So this is, from a cost and a sustainability perspective, it is a better use of computer resources when we can use these async frameworks so that they can do more things while they're waiting. So that's the goal. So I strongly encourage you to consider an async framework if you imagine your apps are ever doing these sorts of slow calls, especially AI calls. So let's go ahead and see what it's like to port to Quart. Because maybe you're thinking like, oh, it's time to port everything to Quart. And I just like saying port to Quart because it rhymes. So let's say here's the Flask app, right? And this is the app that Renee was building on, and I've got it, running here. So the first thing I need to do is I need to bring in Quart, right? So I could change my requirements.txt to bring it in. Looks like the latest version is 0.19.6. I've got this cool extension that will tell me the latest versions in my requirements.txt, which I love. So then I could do, pip install -r requirements.txt, and now that should bring in Quart, and it looks like we've already got it downloaded here. And so then I'm going to change this import here to from Quart, import Quart, and I'm going to keep the other ones the same. So generally, Quart tries to keep as many things similar with Flask as it can. I'll change Flask to Quart. I can change the comments too. No, it doesn't matter. And then what I'm going to do with each of these is put an async in front of these routes. And then I need to look inside the functions and see, are there any calls inside the functions that now need to be awaited? So are there any, calls here that they themselves are also async functions? And it turns out there is. So render template, this is basically an IO operation, right? It's reading a file from your system. It's, figuring out what variables to do, and then it's rendering it back out. So this is actually an asynchronous function, also known as a coroutine. So when you use async def in Python, you are creating what's called a coroutine, which is just a function that has async that needs to be awaited. So if you're trying to get the response from a coroutine, then you do need to await it. So I'm going to go through here and await, and can't await a string. So there we go. That looks good. Now I, need to actually run it. So how do we run a Quart application? It's going to be pretty similar. So we'll do Quart run the port, and let's just see if this will work. All right, they did. Yeah. So some of the options are slightly different. And now we're running the development server, and we can go ahead and open this port. Here we go. So there it is. It is now a Quart application. It looks just the same, but now it's asynchronous. Now it's going to be able to scale to the millions of users hitting up this amazing website. Now, many of you asked about AI and RAG. So I'll go ahead and show you ones that are actually built in Quart. So here, let's make sure this is working today. Write a haiku about Flask. Okay. There we go. So this is a
thank you.
Huh?
Yeah,
bigger, yeah.
Bigger. Love it.
Way big. What about Quart though? So here is a there we go, it did it. This is a simple AI chat app. This is using GPT-3.5 Turbo. This is built in Quart, and you can grab the code for it. I don't have it open locally right now because I didn't know that people were going to ask for it. But it's this app here. So OpenAI-chat app-quick start. That is the app I just showed. And we can go ahead and take a look at the code for it. So we take a look at the Quart app and the chat file. So here you can see this is the handler for the chat. And this is a fair bit fancier because this is not just returning a single JSON. It is actually returning a stream of JSONs. This is something known as JSON lines. And this is something I like to do so that I can stream the response in like a word at a time as it actually comes from the model. So it also makes it feel more responsive to the user. So yeah, so it's getting a little fancier here where we're actually using the yield keyword from Python. So you perhaps you haven't seen yield before. This is what's known. We're making something called a generator. So you can imagine we have this, this function that is generating. It's yielding one JSON at a time, and each of those JSONs has the next, the next word in the stream. So so there's some really interesting Python going on here. And, I do think that there is a learning curve to async and await. I'm still wrapping my head around, some of the things that we have to do with async generators and await and all that stuff. But it does definitely improve scalability. I see a question like, is async really more scalable? Yes. So what happened, the way I know this is because of the other app. So let me show let me show the other app, because this is where I actually first ported to Quart, and it was for scalability reasons. So here, this is a RAG application. So this is already running. So let me go and open this up here. Okay, so this is a RAG application, meaning that we can ask questions on a particular data set. So this one here is like on an employee data set. So we can see like, what's included in my health benefits. So what it's doing is actually going out and it's searching an Azure AI search index to get back matching search results for this question. And then it takes those search results and it sends the original user query. Sorry, I was working on some changes. So let me just get a one up that I'm not currently developing. So this one, here we go. We'll gotta go to the root. Okay. This one's more fun anyway, because this one's a RAG that's on my own blog. So now I get to ask questions about myself. So this one, I've ingested all this data from my own blog. So it's got all my blog posts, right? So if we say like good sleep strategies, let's hope this one comes back. Now it should be searching for amongst my blog posts that I've scraped with Beautiful Soup, which somebody else brought up before, and put them into the Azure AI search index, right? And we can even see the thought process. So it'll go and get the search results, and then it sends these search results to the LLM and say, hey, here's the question, here's the search results, answer the question based on those search results. So this is RAG. And, this is also an open source repo, and this is currently built using Quart. So you can check out the repo here. So back to the story about scalability. Originally, this was built with Flask. We got a complaint from a customer that it wasn't responding very well once it was deployed to App Service. So what I did was that I ran a load test. I like to run load tests using Locust, which is this lovely Python load testing framework. And you just create a Locust file, and there's a Locust file in here that I can use to run these load tests, and I run them all the time. So I ran a load test, and I kept ramping up the number of users I was simulating. And what we saw when we looked at the server logs was, basically like worker contention. Like there weren't enough workers to process the requests, and we were getting all these kind of like funky timeout issues that were all indicating issues with the amount of workers that could process requests, right? And then I ported to Quart and reran the load tests and didn't have those issues. Now I could still run into those issues, if I increase the user count, even more, right? It's not going to be infinitely scalable, because at a certain point, if they're all waiting for the request to come back, like, yeah, then, there's only something you can do. But for the same number of users, Quart made it so that we didn't have the worker contention anymore. So yeah, I see the questions about the repos. So this is the one with the RAG that I just showed. And then there was the earlier, simpler one. Generally, for anything I show, you should be able to get all the links from github.com/Pamela Fox. And you'll see, you can just search by Quart or Flask or whatever it is you're looking for, and find the examples that I've shown. Okay, so there we go. We've ported to Quart. And so as you see, it's fairly straightforward to port to Quart. But the complexity comes in the libraries that you're using, and making sure that you're also making async calls to them, like to your database or your API. And then if you are using any extensions, so Flask has this big extensions ecosystem because Flask is so lightweight. So if you are using any extensions, you have to figure out whether those extensions are going to be compatible with Quart as well. So for example, I recently did another Quart sample where I needed sessions because I was doing user authentication and I needed to store the user cookies. And for that, I used Quart Session, which luckily exists and, was able to work with Redis, which was compatible with what I needed. But I kind of got lucky there, right? So that's where things do get complicated is, with Flask is very lightweight. Oftentimes you're going to use Flask with extensions in order to extend it to do what you want to do. And, the extension ecosystem is limited with how many things are going to work in Quart as well.
We have a question.
Okay. Yeah.
Can async await timeout?
Can async await timeout? I mean, I guess the question is like where, it's a good question. Where, what we mean by timing out, like, where is the timeout happening? So for like app service, usually the timeout is implemented somewhere else, right? Like app service has a maximum timeout, I think, of 420 seconds. So if your call takes longer than 420 seconds, then you're just out of luck. The OpenAI calls, they do also have their own eventual timeouts as well. So I think the thing I've run into more often is maybe app service limits or API limits. I don't think that async and await itself, like as a Python construct, I don't think that they will necessarily time out. But it's very likely that where you're hosting or the API you're calling will have some sort of timeout configured. Okay, and here are the Quart examples. So if you have the link to the slides, so we can go ahead and put a link to the slides once again in the chat. If you have that link, then actually it looks like I put all those examples I just talked about in this slide. That was very convenient. Okay, so now let's spend the last 13 minutes talking about hosting your web apps. So what are your hosting options and why do we even need hosting, right? Like you can see here, like it kind of looks like my app is hosted somewhere. I've got this URL, but this is just this kind of ephemeral URL that's barely like a local host URL that we're just using while developing. When we host an application, we're making it permanent. We're making it so that any point in the middle of the night when we're sleeping, someone else can find our website and then visit our website, right? So we want it to be hosted on infrastructure that's fairly robust and that's always going to be able to serve up that computer. So that's why we don't generally use like our own personal computers as a host. Some people do use like their own Raspberry Pis as a host, and I guess they just keep their Pi alive. Renee, you like Pis, don't you?
That's not me.
Oh, maybe Sarah. I think Sarah likes Pis. We actually do use a Pi in my house, but only as our like DNS proxy, not as a host. But I think some people do. So generally, you want your host to be someone, somewhere where somebody is making sure it stays online, that that it's got replication in case of storms. Legitimately, storms definitely do take down servers. I've been, at Coursera, we had multiple instances where AWS had an outage due to a straight up storm. And, we had to like give everybody A's for that exam because they couldn't do it that time. Right. So, you want it to be robust infrastructure. The things you have to think about is how much control do you want? Like, do you like doing sysops? I think somebody here said that they were cloud architect. Like, do you like administering systems? If do you not like it, like me? And how much scalability do you need, right? Do you want it to potentially be able to scale down to 0 and have you pay nothing for it? And you need it to scale up to, potentially a huge amount, like you're planning some big media blitz about this new startup and you need to go from like 25 users to 25,000. That was something I experienced when I was a CTO. We had to go from 25 to 25,000 within an hour because of this Wired article coming out. And luckily we were on cloud infrastructure, AWS at the time. And we did it. We scaled just fine. We were using function, like their equivalent of functions, right? But that's the sort of thing you need to think about is, do you need like, very extreme scalability, both up and down? So these are the, most popular Azure hosting options. There's Azure Functions, which is, I was saying like the serverless approach. And that can be useful when you just have like this little bit of code that you want to run, especially if it's running in response to like a trigger, because functions have all these triggers. So like, oh, something changed in your blob storage, run a function, right? That's a common use case for it. Azure App Service, that is our platform for hosting and designed to be fairly developer friendly and not really require you to know too much. So that can be a really good option for getting started. Azure Container Apps is a great way to take a containerized app, so one that has a Docker file, and then get that deployed. And we'll be talking about that in the containerizing workshop. And then there's Azure Kubernetes Service. For those of you who really like administering servers, I actually haven't even used it myself. But if you know Kubernetes, we do have it on Azure. For today, I'm going to be using App Service because that's a nice, easy way to get started. But I will also show container apps in the future, and also even a little bit of functions as well. And you'll also want to add on anything that any other services that your app needs, right? So in this case, we don't have a database or caching or anything like that. But generally, once you start to build out a full function website, you're going to want to have database and storage and networking and all these stuff. So you have to figure out what it is you want and, put them all together in an architecture and create all those as your resources. Yeah, I see some good questions, actually. So from Danny says, does Azure App Service take a Docker image? It actually does, and that it has a specific, it's called App Service, bring your own container. I think that's what it's called. It's at least how we refer to it, how we usually refer to it internally. So run a custom container. This is what you'd want to do. You'd want to do a Linux container if you're doing Python. And so here's some instructions here. It looks like this one happens to be maybe a .NET one, but it's a container, so it can be anything. So yeah, App Service does even allow you to bring your own container, which means now when you're deciding between container apps and App Service, it's like, well, App Service allows you to bring your own container, so it becomes harder to decide what to do. But if you like App Service but you also like containers, then this could be a good option for you. And the funny thing is, everything uses Docker behind the scenes, right? So even with App Service, when you're not bringing a container, it's still going to get run in a container. That's why I think it's so valuable to learn Docker, because it turns out everything is just implemented in containers these days. So it's just a good skill to learn. And I also see a good question. So a bit earlier, does Flask and Quart have everything I need to serve content in production environment, or is a web service like Apache Nginx required? So that's a good question. So as I'm saying, we typically use Gunicorn in order to run Flask apps in production. So when I'm setting up a Docker file, so I'll show briefly what a Docker file would look like if I was doing a Flask app on, let's see, we'll do this one. See if I can just find the Docker file just so I can show the Gunicorn command. Right. So yeah, so I would just, I set up a Python image and then I run Gunicorn. So that should be sufficient for productionizing a Flask application. And Gunicorn is also what App Service uses behind the scenes. So what App Service does is that when we deploy something to App Service, it actually auto detects that it's a Flask application. It can kind of tell based off what your code looks like in your requirements.txt. And then it will just set up the Gunicorn command for you. And you can also overwrite it yourself. So sometimes I just overwrite it and say, here's my Gunicorn command. But that is what App Service is using Gunicorn. So that should be good enough for productionizing, because Gunicorn will set up multiple workers and processes according to what parameters you set. So I usually do this gunicorn.conf.py. And I set it these are kind of the settings I do for it. So I'll often say, okay, use as many workers as the CPU count times 2 plus 1. This is this magic formula that's recommended by Gunicorn in terms of what's the optimal number of workers that can handle requests and make good use of the servers without getting overwhelmed. All right. So yeah, we can deploy to App Service. So let me go, and now I've got this open locally. All right. And I've actually already done it. So if you fork this app or clone this app or open in code spaces or locally or whatever, you can also follow the README in order to actually deploy it. And we've set this up so that you can deploy it using the Azure Developer CLI. And so that's this CLI called AZD. So the first thing you have to do is actually log in. So you log into your Azure account, and then you run this command AZD up. So I'll go ahead and run it again so we can watch it go. But I do also already have it up, so I can show you what happened before. Is that it created everything it needed to create. So we create an Azure resource group, and that's just to hold everything that we want to make. Then an app service plan, and that's just where we come up with like our scaling plan for our app service, and then the actual app service. And all of this is defined in Bicep. So I generally like to configure all of my infrastructure using Bicep. Bicep is its own language. It's an infrastructure as code language. It's very similar to Terraform, if you've heard of Terraform. Bicep is just particular to Azure. But I can declare and say, hey, I'm making this app service app. I'm using Python. I'm using 3.10. I should really update that to like 3.12, right? And, I can specify the SKU and all that stuff. And I declare it once in this Bicep, and then I can run this AZD command. It'll look at the Bicep, and then it'll just deploy, what I need to happen. So it'll create those Azure resources, and then it will actually bundle up the code and send it. So let's see. I'm in the midst of deploying, so we'll see if it's still got the previous one open. Let's see. Here we go. So yeah, there's what it looks like deployed onto Azure. Very similar to how it looked locally. This is the actual app service app inside that resource group. So you can see these are the resources that it made inside the resource group. And we can click through and we can check out, the configuration here. We can confirm what, the Python version is. And we could change things here. I always like to change stuff in the Bicep instead, but it's just up to you and how you like to work with things. You could use AZD, you could use the Azure CLI, you could use the portal, you could use the VS Code extensions. There are so many ways of getting your apps up on Azure. So you really want to see what it is that works for you. Okay, so and there we go, it already deployed. We can do one more now now I changed to 3.12. So there you go. That is how we can deploy to Azure. So I encourage you to try it out on your own account with that repo. We are deploying to the free SKU for this one, so it shouldn't cost you any money. And you can also just take it down immediately once you get it up, just to see what it's like to get something deployed. I just saw the question, does Azure have a free plan for deploying apps? So yeah, generally for all these Azure, Azure resources, they have SKUs, and many of them do have free SKUs. So in this case, we are using the free SKU. I default to the free SKU here. So that means that we should not be paying any money for it. Now, the free SKU isn't something you should be using for your, users in production to be hitting up this free SKU. But it's a great way of getting started and making sure that, you like the app service and that your app is working on it. And then you can upgrade to the basic SKUs or the premium SKUs, depending on what your needs are. I see a question from Danny. How do you take it down? Then you can just do AZD down, right? And that'll take down all the resources as well. So if you're worried about costs, even though this one's free, so this one you shouldn't worry about. But we do have lots of other templates that aren't necessarily free, because not everything has a free SKU. We try to work with free SKUs when we can, but we don't always have that option. All right, so great questions, great comments from everybody today. It was super fun to go through all of this with you. I'm sure that there's questions that we didn't manage to hit up today, but remember that we've got a bunch of workshops coming up. So please do join us for all the workshops coming up to talk about databases and Django and Fast API and Docker and testing. And there we go. And thank you, Renee, so much for sharing all your knowledge about Flask and Python as well. You're unmuted, Renee.
I am, because I was grabbing things from the Reactor page and I didn't want it to play another Reactor video during this Reactor video. But don't forget to do the survey that was being popped in the chat. The Reactor team would really appreciate it, and we'd love to get your feedback on how you thought this session went, so we can make future sessions even better and possibly even more AI content. I feel like is the vibe that everyone wants, and some security content, which I've popped in that there might be something coming up on some security content from Pamela, so that would be super cool.
Yeah, we are actually hoping, well, I didn't tell Reactor yet, but we're hoping to do a whole series in July about securing AI applications on Azure. So I think you'll be interested in that one. So yeah, let us know what else we should be talking about. And I guess I'll put AI examples in all the upcoming workshops.
Yay!
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank you,
day, night,
everyone.
etc.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Pamela, Renee, thank you so much. That was a great kickoff to our series. As you mentioned, we are always looking for feedback on our episodes. So if you have anything to share with us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find the link on the screen or in the chat. The event code here is 22169, and we cannot wait to see you at the next episode.